At the end of the day, I mean, the cultures are, are different. But at the end of the day, you find out that you can speak to everyone, and that we all have, the similarities, and so I guess I was surprised to see that even that the cultures are very different. We as people, as human beings, are very similar in the end of the day.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumitech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we're talking about Israel and Japan and everything in between. Meet Anat Tila Cherni, managing partner of Aristagora VC. Anat is co-founder and managing partner at Aristagora VC. Prior to establishing Aristagora, Anat was vice president, head of the Asia practice at Discount Capital Underwriting, a subsidiary of Discount Bank. Prior to that, Anat led the Asia practice at one of Israel's largest law firms. Anat has experience in advising Asian-based investors and leading investment transactions in the Israeli tech market. Anat also has broad familiarity in Asian capital markets, assisting Israeli tech companies tapping into these markets for funding and for exposure to Asian partnerships. Anat holds a Bachelor's of Law and a Bachelor's of Eastern Asian Studies from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She is also a graduate of Beijing Language and Culture University, where she majored in Chinese studies. Anat Tila Cherni, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders, now from Tel Aviv, but I guess usually it's sometimes from Asia, sometimes from Israel, right?
Yeah. But now from Tel Aviv.
Now from Tel Aviv. Anat, you've been on the Israel-Asia ecosystem for the last 12 years. In the last 2 years, have been the managing partner of Aristagora Venture Capital with investors in Asia, but also in the Israeli ecosystem. So really interesting bridge here. What I'm really curious in these 20 minutes or so is to try to understand a little bit about your career and how you ended up making this transition to sort of encapsulate both ecosystems, and then what's happening today, and what can we as entrepreneurs learn about this merging of ecosystems so that we can work with it. So Anat, thank you very much for joining me.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I'm happy to be here. So yes, I'm one of the founders and managing partner at Aristagora VC. It's an early stage VC fund operating in Israel. And I've been in the VC and tech investment ecosystem for the last several years. But even before that, I was very keen on the Israel-Asia space. And this is something that my career is, based upon. So actually, I studied my BA at the Hebrew University. I studied law and Eastern Asian studies. And immediately after I graduated, I relocated to Beijing, China. There I studied Chinese in one of the universities, and I worked as an analyst in a Chinese business consulting firm. I was the only non-Chinese employee in that firm. And at that time, I was mainly engaged in mobile payments space. It was around 2010, 2011, and China was one of the pioneers in mobile payment solutions. So I had a lot of work in that respect. And by the way, even today, if you ever got to visit China or one of the big cities in China, there are beggars in the street, and even the beggars in the street, they're using the WeChat digital wallet in order to claim for money from people in the streets. So yeah, just a funny fact. So after 2 years in China, I came back to Israel. I spent a few years in one of Israel's leading law firm as a lawyer in the tech department. I did tech and M&A deals with Chinese and Singaporean-based investors who invested in the Israeli tech ecosystem. Even at that time, I was visiting China and Singapore quite often and brought dozens of Chinese investors to Israel to invest in, Israeli startups. And after a few years, I decided I want to move to the investment space. So I joined Discount Capital as a VP and the head of the Asia practice. And in that time, I was doing investments from pre-seed to pre-IPO in various segments, from food tech to cyber, et cetera, with Asian-based, typically institutional investors, but also private investors who were looking to get diversification and exposure to the Israeli tech ecosystem. I was working quite a lot with Japanese investors, and I really come to the realization that there is a huge demand from the Japanese side to get exposed to the Israeli tech. And on the other hand, many Israeli companies look at the Asia market as one of their target markets, and it's quite difficult to access the Asian market, especially the Japanese market. And it requires expertise. And this is actually the background to the establishment of Aristagora VC.
So give me, a 30,000 feet in the air. What's happening today in terms of the relationship between Israel and Asia, specifically when it comes to the startup ecosystem and venture capital? What are the different avenues in which entrepreneurs from either places are dealing with investors from either place?
Yeah. Okay. So, I think that like 10 years ago, Israeli companies started looking not only on the US market as a target market for, from business point of view, but also on Asian markets. And I roughly up until 2015, China had a very important place in the ecosystem as an investor, as a business partner for Israeli companies. But I would say that sometime after 2015, two things happened. First, there was an internal regulation within China that concerns investments outside of China and basically restricts investments outside of China. And second of all, the US-China trade war is obviously impacting the ecosystem. And basically, Japan became, a good candidate for collaboration between Israel and Japan. And actually, next year, Israel and Japan are going to celebrate 70 years of diplomatic relations. And even though we have a long history of diplomatic relations, only in the last few years, the business relationship between the two countries got closer. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that the mutual visits of the governments of the State of Israel and Japan in 2015. And with Japan, it's really a matter of, getting the support of the government in order for the business community to follow. And I think that that's what happened. And, just last year in 2021, roughly $3 billion of investments came from Japan to Israel. Yeah, which is a huge amount. And it's actually 2 times the amount of 2020. And so we see this collaboration growing. And, typically Japanese investors like to invest in later stage. They like to invest in something that they can grasp. And for us at Aristagora VC, we're quite unique in that sense because we really invest in pure early stage companies in the seed and the pre-seed stage.
Mm-hmm. What is some of the added value that that is coming from specifically now Japan with Aristagora VC, that we're looking at Israeli startups. The capital is no longer the most critical piece of the investment. Obviously, of course, it is, but there are still
Yeah.
now many other layers of an investment process that come to a decision for a joint collaboration between a startup and an investor. What are some of the things that are not trivial that are coming from the Asian market and investors that startups here in Tel Aviv or Israel in general can utilize?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always say that for us, it's an added value that we can bring to our portfolio companies with respect to the Japanese market, specifically in the Asian market in general. But, most of our companies, their initial market is the US, and that's very natural. But in terms of the Asian market, it's a market that you really have to know and you have to understand how it works. And specifically with the Japanese market, collaborations with Japanese partners is something that takes time. You need to be very patient. You need to have a very long-term vision. And for us Israelis, we're very anxious to do things fast, and we think fast, and we want processes to move fast. And so sometimes it creates some kind of conflict. And this is the reason that I think it's important to have someone in the middle who is able to understand, both sides, the Israeli side and the Japanese side, and is able to just, be the middleman in this story. Obviously, the Japanese market is a huge market. And for many companies, such as, robotic-oriented companies, companies in the space of silver tech, this market is really relevant.
Right. So how does an entrepreneur know in today's world whether it is relevant to be looking at not just Asia as a market for selling the product, but also as a market for investing in the product? What are some things that today's entrepreneurs can do to really understand whether there is an added value there that would go both ways?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of the timing where you explore this opportunity. On the one hand, entrepreneurs should not go into the Japanese market at a very early stage of the life of the company, because, as I said, it takes time, it takes resources, it takes the management time, and so you should really do it when you're at a stage that is suitable. On the other hand, as I said, it takes time. So we have to find the right timing in order to explore this opportunity.
Right. And so the steps of actually approaching an investment opportunity of this sort, is it the same way that one would approach an investment opportunity with the traditional VC in Israel?
Yeah. So for us, I mean, we're a pure financial VC. We're not a corporate VC in any way. We're not, strategic. So I assume, yes, it's the same approach that any entrepreneur would take with any global or Israeli VC.
But I am assuming that there are some subtle, perhaps, differences in the culture, especially as at the end of the life cycle of working with an investment firm that is also based in Asia. There are some cultural nuances that one might want to adjust to be able to have everybody feel comfortable. What are some things that I should keep in mind as I'm forming relationships with people in Asia?
Yeah. Okay, so one thing you have to bear in mind is to be, you have to be really polite and patient. And it's not always the right moment to say jokes. Sometimes it's not considered as a joke in the other side. For us, as a VC that has a strong orientation in Japan, our partners are have worked, globally and in the US and in Europe for many years. And so these type of nuances are less felt. But when someone is working, with a hardcore Japanese corporate, then you really have to be patient, to be polite, to have the long-term vision. I would say these are the important things to bear in mind.
Amazing. Anat, you've been in this for 12 years, but I wanted to ask before, how did you even get to Beijing in the first place? How did you end up yourself forming this, sort of dual citizenship, non-diplomatic, but still dual citizenship, at least in at heart, for these two continents that are so vastly different?
Yeah. So I guess, ever since I was a child, I was very interested in cultures and in different cultures and in understanding different people. And from a very young age, I realized that languages is some kind of a gateway to understanding people. And so in junior high, I studied Arabic, and then I was chosen to go with a delegation of 3 Israelis and 3 Palestinian from Hebron to Norway to have some discussions about the situation in Israel and about the conflict. And later on at the university, I studied Chinese, and then I felt I really wanted to experience in firsthand the people and the mindset. And so I I took my stuff and relocated to Beijing. And so yeah, this is the way I started my career with Asia.
What surprised you along this journey so far? It's a pretty unique journey, and I'm sure full of surprises all around. But what's really been surprising for you in these last few years?
At the end of the day, I mean, the cultures are different, but at the end of the day, you find out that you can speak to everyone, and that we all have the similarities, and so I guess I was surprised to see that even that the cultures are very different. We as people, as human beings, are very similar in the end of the day.
Take me back a little bit, Anat, to the founding of Aristagora. What is it like starting a fund with investors in Asia? What kind of sort of work do you need to do together with them so that there is an alignment of understanding of what's happening here in the Israel ecosystem? How do investments get made? How do startups think and feel? What kind of work did you have to do to sort of align everybody around the table?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because most of the Japanese LPs that we have in our fund were not familiar with the Israeli tech ecosystem before investing in Aristagora VC. But actually, I spent several years together with my partner in Japan, introducing to the Israeli ecosystem, to the Israeli startups, and most importantly, to the Israeli early stage startups, because typically Japanese investors are used to exploring investments in later stage companies, and so looking at the early stage ecosystem is something that is really new to them. And so we had to do a lot of work in that sense, of introducing the challenges of investing in early stage, which is completely different from investing in later stage companies. And on top of that, we had to do a roadshow in the peak of COVID, which is kind of difficult because in Japanese you do business, you meet in person, and so Zoom and virtual video calls is challenging, but doable after all.
I love it. What did you enjoy most about your work so far here? Because again, investments are awesome, startups are awesome, working with Asia is amazing, but what really is the most fun that you get out of your work today?
I feel very lucky because I wake up in the morning and I do what I really like to do the most. And naturally, I'm a very curious person. I love to learn, and I feel that every day I learn so much because I get to meet bright people who are starting you know innovative startups with super interesting technologies. And at the end of the day, this is the work that I like to do.
Is it the investing, the supporting them afterwards, both?
Yeah. I mean, the investment part is, I mean, it's an important part because this is, there is kind of a short term period where you really have to um, get to know, the prospect, the candidate for investment. And so it's a really intense time where you meet and you get to know the company, but mainly you get to know the people that are leading these startups. And I think that this is the most interesting thing in the process.
I love it. Anat, I really want to thank you for coming here. I think that the work that you're doing with Aristagora, with Asia in general, but it's very interesting because it's different. There's at the end, our ecosystem is so wide and so incredible, and there's so many opportunities around the world, and I just love it when people come and they bridge the gaps between the different geographies, but not just geographies, also culturally. And at the end, it's an amazing contribution to our ecosystem here in general. And I got to meet Aristagora in different ways by now, and I know that it's such an awesome VC. So thank you very much for spending the time here with me, and stay safe and stay healthy.